do that, the inevitable challenges are going to come up, and you're going to then move on to something else 100%. That's more enjoyable. And so the other thing I look at is business is about constantly not only adding such massive value, doing more for others than anybody else, but it's also simultaneously about your own psychology. It's your ability to go through thresholds of control. It's like, I can remember when I didn't have $50,000 to keep the doors open on my company. I had 12 employees and 11 wanted to quit because they hated the person running the show. And $50,000 would be like 500 million to me today. And I figured out how to get through that threshold. And once I did, like all the problems related to that were handled. I know you've done this as well. And then I had a $5 million lawsuit that was totally unfair and unjust. And I finally had just the amount of time, energy, and money I had to bite the bullet and do it. And $5 million was more than I could remember. Then I had a partner who took a company that was losing $1 million a day and turned it to 1.5 billion in positive EBITDA. I'm not mentioning names, Amway. And he wanted me to join him in business with some other partners, not doing the multi-level side. Did the business, put in 10 million bucks. We all put in 10 million, it was 40 million in debt. But I signed joint and several, which I didn't understand in those days what that meant. And two of my partners were supposedly billionaires and they went broke. We bought some more companies. I ended up with $120 million in debt that I was on the hook for. No one else had any money. And I'm getting up to do a seminar wanting to throw up. It was a new threshold of control. So you know when you ski or you snowboard and you think you're just new at it and you think you're going down a blue or green and it turns out to be a double black. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
And so you have two choices. One is you start to go down and you freak out and you're going to die. You slam on the ground and try to hang on for dear life. Or the other is, baby, you focus on where you want to go and you find a way to curve. You find a way to cut. And once you do it a couple of times,
you get used to it.
You have no more fear of that element. Now, my biggest one out of that led me to $1 billion. I have 31 companies now, to give you an idea, 7 different industries as diverse as like stem cells to virtual reality. We have the exclusive for the NBA now in virtual reality, to give an example. I got 1,200 employees. We're on 3 continents, and we got $5 billion in sales. But I did that because I first stayed on one frickin' thing.
Exactly,
I got so masterful.
So what do you think was the first real breakthrough that you had as a teen that started you on your path, and how did you get there?
Gosh, there's so many. One of the first ones, I think, was probably just anchoring in when my mom and my dad, I had 4 different fathers. My mom was a powerful woman, so she kicked my 4th father out, whose name I carry, and he adopted me. And when he went out, she decided it wasn't his side, so she kicked me out too by chasing me out with a knife. And I wasn't worried she was going to stab me or anything, but I decided this is freedom, and I've got to find a way to make my life work. But I had no money. I had a 1960 Volkswagen I worked $40 a week as a janitor to buy and pay for. And so I had no car, I had no money, I had no anything. I went and slept in a person's laundry room, and then I decided I've got to figure out what to do, and I needed to feed my mind because I was so depressed, I was so overwhelmed, I'm missing my brother and sister and feeling just completely out of sorts. So I got on a bus and I traveled 14 miles, I remember, because I ended up running it one time, and I went to this bookstore and I bought this book called The Magic of Believing by Claudia Bristol. It's the first real book other than maybe Think and Grow Rich or Emerson's essays. And I started on this journey of saying, every single day, I'm going to feed my mind. I'm not going to hope good thoughts show up. I'm going to read biographies. I'm going to find out what makes people tick. I'm going to understand what makes me tick. And I wanted to read a book a day, but I didn't do that. I took a speed reading class, and I read 700 books over 7 years. And they were all personal development, human development, psychology, physiology. And then what I try to do is take anything that I learned and apply it. And then when I applied it, I was 5'1" in my sophomore year in high school. I'm 6'7" now. I tell people the difference is personal growth. Really. But sincerely, I became Mr. Solution because I wanted to help everybody. So I was this little fat guy, and I couldn't lose weight, and I lost weight. And all my buddies are like, how'd you do that? And I said, well, here's what I did. And they lost weight, and then we all got girls. And that led to, as a young kid, that led to where, if you had a problem, I was Mr. Solution. Especially if you're a girl, I was more motivated to help you. So the breakthrough was really understanding the power of compressing decades into days. That if someone has spent decades of their life and they compress it into a book, and you can read it in an hour or a few days, you have such an advantage. Because when you learn by your own experience, it's painful and it's slow. When you learn by other people's experience, everybody knows in the financial world, other people's money is leverage, right? Well, other people's experience is more powerful than other people's money. Because you can have the money and lose it. But if you get the experience, you can change it all. So I think that was the beginning for me. And it set me on a lifelong path of hunger. I've never lost my hunger. Rule number 2, get the shoulds. Like, think about it.
Most people have a list of shoulds, don't they? Don't you have a list of the shoulds, things you should do, you should follow through on? I should lose some weight, I should work out more, I should make more calls, I should respond more rapidly to my email, whatever, I should get into the office earlier, I should be, more confident, whatever your should list is. People love to have their should list be met, but it's kind of like New Year's resolutions. If it does, it's really exciting, but if it doesn't, which is most of the time, it's a little disappointing, but you kind of know it's not going to happen. But when you decide something is a must for you, an absolute must, when you cut off any possible, you say, I'm going to find the way or I'm going to make the way. Human beings, when they resolve things, when they make a real resolution inside themselves, which is they raise the standard and they make it a must, they find the way. Think about it in your own life. Haven't you had some area of your life where you raise your standard and your life has never been the same? Maybe at one time in your life you smoked cigarettes, or you did something and you did it for years and you kept trying to change it and kept telling yourself I should. And then one day something happened. Something just clicked you over. Something took you over that kind of tipping point. And inside yourself you said no more. And it was a very, very different experience, wasn't it? Something inside of you shifted, and what was a should became a must, and you've never gone back. Is there an area like that in your life you can think of? Again, did you ever smoke cigarettes? Did you ever eat a certain way, drink a certain form of alcohol, and then finally say no more, and you just don't go back? And notice this, it doesn't really take any willpower anymore. Because somewhere when we make this click, when we make something a must, we attach ourselves to it. It becomes part of our identity. And one thing I've learned in the last, 33 years of working with people from now over 100 countries, 4 million people, is human beings absolutely follow through on who they believe they are. If you said to me, well, I'm really going to work hard to stop smoking, but I've been a smoker my whole life and I am a smoker, I know your days are numbered. You're going to be back smoking cigarettes again, because we all act consistent with who we believe we are. I tell people the strongest force in the whole human personality is this need to stay consistent with how we define ourselves. If you define yourself as somebody who is really conservative, you're not going to be crazy and act nuts unless you're really drunk or something, and then you can say it's the alcohol, when it's really just you finally getting permission to be yourself. The alcohol is your excuse. If you're a really crazy person, you act crazy, outrageous, playful. You don't act conservative because that's not who you are. Very often people say, well, I can't do that. I'm not that kind of person. And I always say to people, really, when did you define yourself? I mean, really, how many years ago did you come up with what you could and couldn't do in your life? How many years ago? Most people, if they really look at how they're living their life today, it's based on a set of standards, a set of beliefs that they made choices about 10, 20, 30 or more years ago. I mean, very often we made decisions in our youth or very young about what to believe, about what we were capable of, about who we are as a person, and that becomes the glass ceiling, if you will, that controls us. There's a corny metaphor, but it's true. I remember one time I was with my family at the circus, and there was a person there, and they had this big, giant elephant, and you look at this elephant, and they take this little rope, put it around the elephant's neck, and they drive this stake into the ground. And I mean, you look at this and you know that elephant could rip down the entire tent with almost no effort. And yet the elephant doesn't struggle, doesn't try. Why? Because the elephant's conditioned. And they take that elephant and condition the elephant when it's a baby elephant. That's how they train them. When it's a little baby elephant and it doesn't have the power yet, they put a big rope around it and they drive this huge stake in the ground, and the elephant fights and fights and fights. And one day, finally, that elephant decides, I'm not capable of pulling this out. And once that becomes the definition of an identity of anyone, an elephant in this case, they don't even try anymore. It's just who I am, that's how it is, that's just the way it is in my life. I'd like to ask you to take a look at any place you've got a limitation and ask yourself, when did I decide to accept that limitation? And you may not even see it as a limitation, you might see it as just that's who I am. But so often in our lives, we've adapted to be a certain way so that we don't fail or so that people will like us or respect us, but it's not necessarily who we are. Joy comes when you're spontaneous. It's really hard to be truly happy when you're not being yourself. And most of us have no clue who we are. And so a big part of my work, if you've ever been to an event, you know, is to get people to do things spontaneously without thinking, because that's when the real you shows up. That's when the energy comes alive. And when you do that, when you start to connect to your true nature, suddenly there's energy available for you to set a higher standard for what you want in your life. That's what this is really all about. And when I talk about standards, when I talk about, shoulds versus musts, think about your own life. I know there have been areas in your life where some point in time you just shifted and you raised the standard and your life changed. Because whatever people have their identity attached to, they live. We live who we believe we are. That's just how it works. It's just kind of like, I'll give you an example. Look at your physical body. Your physical body today is an absolute reflection of only one thing, not your goals, not your desires, but your standards. The identity you have for yourself. If your standard is you're an athlete, then there's a certain amount of strength, a muscle tone, and energy that's available in your body on a regular basis because that's who you are. And so you do whatever's necessary to maintain that identity. Again, the strongest force in the human personality is this need to stay consistent with how we define ourselves. Because if you don't know who you are, you wouldn't know how to act. Once you lock in on that identity, your brain finds a way to keep you there. If you say, man, I'm overweight, I've always been overweight, I'm big boned, and that's the story you got, then you're gonna always find a way to get back there. That's your settling point. That's your identity. That's where things lock in. If you see somebody who's in really great shape, you ask them, do you work out? You know the answer. Yes. How often? And they'll tell you 3 times, 4 times, 5 times a week, whatever. In a seminar, I'll ask people, who here works out at least 5 days a week? And I'm stand up. And you look around that room and you know that they work out 5 times a week because you can see their body. You don't just get a result without some kind of action, without some form of ritual. Ritual meaning actions you do consistently. Now, do you think those people that are out there working out 5 days a week, do they have more time than you do? Or I have, or anybody else? Of course not. Is their life less busy? Of course not. It's just a must for them. They must work out that way, and they've made that turn and their life changed. So I'm not saying you have to work out 5 days a week. I'm just saying whatever you really want, wants don't get met consistently. Standards do. Whatever you identify, this is who I am. And so it's not so much about changing your identity as it is expanding it. Deciding that, instead of your goals to lose 10 pounds, which is not compelling, what if your vision was to get back to my fighting weight? This year, this month, this next 90 days, I'm going to transform my body. I'm going to take on a new challenge. I'm going to find some technique or strategy. There's a million of them that can reframe myself where I want to feel younger, stronger, more vibrant than ever before. Here's my reasons. Because I want the energy to really make my life work. Because it's tough out there and I want to be stronger than I've ever been before. I want to go in front of the mirror and if I'm naked, not, want to laugh. I want to look there and take a good look and go, yeah, I'm proud of whatever I see there. Whatever it takes, something's going to make you laugh, smile, something that's going to tease yourself, but something's going to move you to another level. If you identify yourself in a new way and you own that every day, and that becomes the standard of how you live, you'll find the way to make that standard real. Money's the same way. Think about it. It doesn't matter what's happening, quote unquote, in the marketplace. People that make money find a way to make money no matter what, don't they? I mean, most people's standard is to pay their bills. So that's what most people find a way to do, even when economic times get tough. Most people, if that's their absolute standard, they find a way. Some people's standard is pay their bills most of the time. And so most of the time they do. Some people's standard is not just to pay their bills, but to take care of their family and maybe even some of their friends. And they find a way. In fact, some people may be in a family where they don't have enough money. They barely have money to pay their bills. They work their guts out. And then somebody, their mother, their father, somebody else, their sister gets ill, and there's not enough money to take care of it. Nobody else has money in the family. They don't either, but they find a way to get that money to take care of their mother or father, don't they? And pay their bills. They never could do it before. Why? The situation made them raise their own standard. And not everybody does that. Somebody else in the family might have money and still not take care of their mother. It all comes down to the inner game, my friends. Changing your life is a change in the inner game. The outside world you can't control, but you have absolute control over this one if you learn the dynamics of what shapes you. And identity is one of those simple, clear, fundamental basics that if you start to shift it, everything else will shift in your life as well. Some people, by the way, have to have more than enough money to do what they want, when they want, where they want, with whomever they want, contribute the way they want. And if that's their must, they find a way. I know that sounds overly simplistic, but it's true. Somebody once said you can take all the money in the world out of the hands of everybody, out of all the wealthy people in the world who are really successful, give it to other people. It wouldn't take too long. Those people would have it back in their hands. It's not because they're manipulative. It's because they have a standard. Some are manipulative, don't get me wrong, but they've got a standard of what they're going to find a way to make happen.
That's kind of the point I think people, most businesses fail at the beginning in the first few years. So there you are on your own. What do you think were the keys to success those first few years by yourself?
Obsession with adding more value than anybody else ever dreamed of. I mean, my entire life from the very beginning days was, how do I do more for others than anyone else on earth? How do I give them experiences that are lasting? How do I create change where change was impossible? How do I take somebody who's been in therapy for 7 years and in an hour produce that result? And the way I did that was by challenging traditional psychologists and psychiatrists and getting on national radio and saying, give me your worst patient, I'll handle them in an hour, which was pretty abrasive. As a young kid, you can get by with that stuff. But the best part was I backed it up. And so one of the first interventions I did was in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I got on the radio, and this psychiatrist got on the phone and just on the radio live and just thrashed me. You're a liar. You're a charlatan. People like you should not be allowed on the radio. Mm-hmm. And I said, sir, I said, are you a scientist? He said, of course, I'm a physician. Mm-hmm. I said, well, a scientist would never make an assumption. And I said, you've never met me, right? No. You've never met my clients? No. And you're calling me a liar on national radio. I said, you must be stating your hypothesis. Your hypothesis is that I'm a liar and a charlatan, and if you're stating a hypothesis and you're truly a scientist, you got to be willing to test it. Mm-hmm. Am I right?
Yep.
He goes, well, yeah. I said, great, I'm doing a free guest event at the Holiday Inn tomorrow night. Anyone hearing my voice can come. I'm going to do a series of demonstrations, and I'm going to take one of your clients and turn around. I said, share with me somebody that you've never been able to change. I said, I'm sure you got plenty of those. You want to play hardball? I can play hardball. He goes, well, I have patients that aren't ready to change yet. I said, I haven't found any. Of course, I've done 3 therapies total. But I had so much belief. So long story short, he told me this woman he'd been working on for 7 years with a snake phobia. A phobia is not just a fear, it's an uncontrolled response to fear. So like, she dreamed the snake would bite her on the face, and then the adrenaline would shoot through her body and wake her up. And this would happen 4 to 7 times a night.
Oh my goodness.
7 years. So, he was put in a corner, and so he brought her down, and it took me about 15 minutes. At the end of it, I tested first, and she's screaming and shaking, and then I wrapped the snake around her. And that changed my entire career, because in that moment, there was no question. Everybody in the audience saw that this woman is transformed. And I said, you've been treated by that psychiatrist for how many years? Wow. 7 years. Then I took on sports stars. Then I turned around, I did some work with Mother Teresa, and Nelson Mandela, and Bill Clinton. And as the years went by, it just built and built and built.
They go through business mastery to make them an owner, so they can start to say, I really could have somebody else in some of these, taking over some of these clients. And most are scared to do that initially because they go, that's my income. Mm-hmm. But we show them how to time it so that gradually you end up getting more income from other people working than yourself. Then you do your best work. It's like the goal is get financially free, not so you never work again. Because if you don't ever work again, you'll dry up inside. It's like when I was growing up, everybody's like, making the money to get rich and retire. So I did that at 26, which was so absurd. And the amount of money I had, I thought was more than you could spend. Of course, that was not true. But what I learned is it's really about making enough money you don't ever have to work again, and then you work harder and you enjoy it more. Steve Wynn's a dear friend of mine who built most of Las Vegas, and he's 74. Peter Gruber, who's here in LA, a friend of mine who owns the Warriors and Los Angeles Dodgers. Mm-hmm. He owns movie companies. 74 years old, does more today than when I knew him when he was 50. Warren Buffett, 84, 85 now, works harder today than ever before. None of those people have to work. They do it because it's so fulfilling, but it's different when you don't have to work.